In this video, I'm going to show you how I mosaic onto a concrete stepping stone. Now, if you're going to be doing this project, you need to make sure that you choose the right tessera that goes on top of your stepping stone if people are going to be walking on it, because you don't want them to slip on it. And also you need to take into consideration the environment that it's going into. But my stepping stone that I'm doing is actually going to be just going into the garden. So anyway, let's get into the video. Now I'm going to mosaic onto a concrete stepping stone. Now you can buy a pre-made stepping stone. They're not very expensive. However, I made my own, and it would have been some time ago now. And if you're interested in seeing how I made my concrete stepping stone, I'll put a link up the top of the screen here somewhere, and that will take you directly to that video. Now I'll also put the link in the bottom of the description box of this video, and that link will also take you directly to that video. It's not very difficult making your own, but it depends whether you want to do that. Now this design I came up with probably about a week ago, and I've been working on it, and I think it's going to look quite good as a stepping stone. It's going to be quite bold, and it should be quite fun to do. Now I did this on the computer, and I find that's the easiest way for me to do it because I cannot draw for anything. I just cannot draw. I can't even draw stick figures properly. So I decided to do this on the computer. Now what I'm going to do is, as we get going, I'm going to actually put a piece of plastic over this design, and then I'm actually going to put alkaline resistant mesh over the top of that. And I'm actually going to adhere to the mesh, and I'm going to actually just tack the tessera onto the mesh, because the actual adhesive I'm going to be using is going to be the one, my final adhesive, that will actually adhere this down and do all the heavy work to actually bond this to the actual concrete substrate. So I'm going to be using thin set, and for those people in Australia, thin set is the American terminology for a cement-based adhesive. So don't go into Bunnings or to your nearest retailer asking for thin set. You will need to ask for a cement-based adhesive. So I'm going to be doing that a bit further down the track. But for the time being, I've also created, or I've duplicated this, but in black and white. And the reason why I did it in black and white was because it just saves a bit of ink. All I've done is I've actually just taken a slice out of this, which is the same size. I've just taken a slice out and made this piece. So I could actually get this heart, which is this one here, out of here. And then I'll be able to cut this heart out of this piece here. And also I may have to duplicate another piece to actually get this particular area here. So I'm not really quite sure whether I'm going to have this as a two-piece, or maybe I'm going to do smaller pieces and fill this. I'm not really quite sure on that. I'm not that worried about that area yet, because my main concern is choosing my colors. And I've already done this in the colors that I'm going to be doing it in. However, this color and this color are not going to remain, or rather this color and this is not going to be white and blue. What I've decided on doing is doing this, and I don't know whether you'll be able to see that, but this is a beautiful goldy color, and I'm going to be using, and this is a glass tile, and I'm going to be doing this in the center, and then this silver one, I'm going to be filling that up in the white area there. I'm going to be using the Johnson tiles, so this is the blue, and that will be going in this area, and also I'm going to be using that in the outside area. Now I'm thinking about doing sort of like using larger pieces of tile in this area. I'm not really quite sure about that either, but I don't have to make that decision up now, because the main thing is that I've chosen my color of the tiles I'm going to be using, and also the grout color. So there's the blue I'm going to be using for there, which is like a sky blue, the yellow for there, and of course the red for the red hearts. So they're my colors. I'll just move these aside. And what I've done is I've actually cut out the heart. Now, I'm going to be using my Montolit double-wheeled nippers, and maybe even my compound nippers, which I don't have with me right now, but I'm going to be using these. I can also use my Lepinette double-wheeled nippers as well. So if you don't have the monoliths, it's not something that you can't do. If you've got the lepinets, you can still do this with the Johnson Malaysian tiles. However, I have these here and I find these work brilliantly. So that's what I'm going to go with for this particular job. What I'm going to do now is I've already cut this out of here and it's not that difficult. This is just a fairly thick card that I put through my laser printer at home, and as you can see, it doesn't need to be a great quality as long as the outline is there. This one I used a thinner paper, which was a better paper to put through, and so there's a lot less banding in this colour one than this black and white one. But I'm only using this just to cut the hearts out. So I've done that. So all I'm going to do now is just go around this in a pen or a texter. And this will create my template. What I don't want to do is, and I'll just go around this first before I continue talking. Okay, so that's it there. What I don't want to do is cut something out with this, like cut this out with my monoliths and then use this as a template. When you are creating something like this, where accuracy is reasonably important, then you really want to use the piece that you're starting off with, which is the original piece for me. I want to use this as the template. Well, I've used the heart template and I've gone through each of these tiles, so they're good to go. I've gone around those with a texture color, and I've also used a straight edge and put a line through the center with also a texture color. And you don't have to do that, it just gives a guide on where to use your glass scorer. Sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't. In this particular instance, I decided to do it. So I'm going to now just mention about wearing a P2 or an N95 dust mask. Very important, because you don't want to breathe in the silica dust that comes from tiles, crockery and other materials. So using this will help protect you. And also don't forget your protective eyewear, very, very important. Now I'm going to just use my glass scorer and go from one end of the tile right through to the other end of the tile, making sure that I go in a straight line along the center of the heart without stopping. And you'll hear that score line, which I quite like the sound of. Now I'm going to use my scorer breakers now to break this in half. Right, here we go. Yep, and it did veer off up there, but the center is pretty straight, so I'm quite happy about that. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my monolith nippers, and I'm going to be going around nipping off small pieces. Now I'd prefer to nip off big pieces, or even using a glass scorer to go around this edge here. However, these Johnson tiles can be really quite difficult to work with in small things like this. So I'm going to divide and conquer. So small pieces chipping away, and then hopefully I'm not going to break off this area here, because this area down here, the point, is going to be the weakest part. So let's get into it. It's a bit of a wastage doing it this way, but you know, there's a bit of waste, but you know, these ones you're going to be using anyway for another project, so you keep those. So I'm going to continue on doing all the others exactly the same, and we'll come back and I'll show you all the red hearts done. Now, these are not all identical. They're fairly close, but they're not all identical. And we need to remember, when we're doing mosaics or anything handmade, we're not after perfection. It's handmade, and we have to realize that there are going to be some differences in everything that we make. Now I'm up to the next stage, which is cutting out the yellow hearts. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be getting the black and white piece of paper that I had before. I'm going to be cutting out the yellow heart out of that, even though it's in black and white. and I'm going to be using that as the template, and I'm going to repeat the process as to what I did with these red hearts, but using the yellow tiles. And then after I've completed those, we'll come back, have a look at them, and we'll be up to the next stage. Well, I've cut out all the yellow hearts and I think that they look quite good. And I'm up to the next stage, which is cutting out the blue templates. Oh, and I also bought some new gloves for when I'm cutting tile, because I'm going to be cutting a bit of tile. So I thought I might protect my hands. Now, I've decided to actually, instead of doing one template like I did with the red hearts and the yellow hearts, and using that as a master template, what I've decided to do, and I've already printed them out, is print out each blue one will have a number, and I've decided that every blue one here around this whole thing will have its own individual template. And the reason why I've done that is because there's going to be a bit of a variation between my cutting of the red hearts and also the yellow hearts, as well as my design. And because these need to fit reasonably well, I think that making individual templates for them, and then also I can fine tune that, is going to be the way moving forward. So I'm going to give that a go. So I'm going to clear this area, and then I'm going to cut out the blue templates out of these printouts that I've done here, because they're individually marked, so I know which one goes where. All right, well, I'm just laying down the hearts on either side of number 4, and I can tell you this is going to need some alteration in it, because I can see that it's not going to be right, but that's why we do this. Okay, so I need to actually fix this area in here. It needs some off in here. So it just needs a little bit off in there. But I kind of like expected that. Well, I've adhered the template down. All I did was just get a piece of tape on each corner. And now what I'm going to do is adhere the plastic down as well. And that's really just duplicating the same thing. I'm just going to get, which I have a couple of pieces here, I'm just going to get this and adhere it down on the corners. Nothing special, just ordinary sticky tape. Just what you've got. You really don't want to be buying any more things than what you need. There you go. And now what I'm going to do is adhere the mesh down as well, repeating, doing the same thing. Make sure that you push down on the tape, because the mesh has less surface area than what plastic and paper does, so you want to make sure that it's really adhered well, because you don't want anything to move. Okay, that's it. Now I've got my thin set in a baggie and I'm all ready to go. This will give me complete control over using the thin set. Now I'm going to start with number 1 and work around. I really don't want to apply the red ones first and then the yellow ones. I want to finish it as I go, because if I need to adjust anything, that gives me a good chance to adjust it before the thin set starts setting up. So let's start. So we're looking at number 1. So I'm applying it a reasonably generous amount to hold it in place, but not a huge amount. It's generous. And I'm just going to sit it there like that, because I'm going to be using thin set to actually adhere this mosaic mesh to the actual stepping stone. Now I'll go with number 1 in the heart, and I have those already here in a container. Number 1 and number 1, it's that one. Okay, I'm going to leave this and probably for a couple of days so it sets up really well, and then we'll come back and start doing the center. But even though I can do the center now, I'd prefer to leave it and let this cure and then come back and do the center, because I really don't want to move any of this. Oh, I almost forgot. Don't forget to remove any excess thin set that is on the outside of your mandala here, of your pattern, and I've got a little bit here. See how well it moves away when you leave it for a little while? And I've got another piece here. And the reason being is if you don't remove that, it's going to set up very, very hard, and you won't be able to butt the next piece up to that. So making sure you clean up as you go or when you finish is very, very important. Well, there you go. The keystoning is all complete, and I think it certainly looks a lot better than having big gaps in your tiles like this when you're going around a circle. You can get away with small gaps, but big gaps like that, you are much better off keystoning, and it makes the piece flow so much better. Now, I've decided to kind of like change a couple of things. What I was going to do is actually thin set all this down in the center. However, the tiles, these glass tiles, are a little bit thinner than the tiles here, the ceramic tiles. They're probably about half the thickness. And I was going to build it up with thin set. However, I've changed my mind, and I'm actually going to take this off and then turn this over, cut the center out, and then actually mount this onto the stepping stone, and then we'll do the inside piece separately. And I'm going to use epoxy sculpt for that because I can build it up to the height that I need. So all I'm going to do now is just get a piece of this laminate, put over the top to keep this all together. And this is a laminate, but you can use contact or sticky tape, whatever you prefer. It's only going to hold it temporarily. And then I can move it, and then I can peel them off or stick them on like that and then peel it off. So what I'm going to do now is actually release this from the tape. There's no two ways about it. It certainly did stick down well. There we go. It's coming off the plastic all right. There you go. And then what I'm going to do is actually cut around this now. And I'm going to cut fairly close to the edge. Okay, so I'm now going to flip this over, and I can just flip it over like this, or you can use a board. There you go. And now what I'll do is I'll mix up the thin set and then apply it to this area. I've got my thin set ready, and I'm just going to give it another stir because it has been slaking. And when you're mixing your thin set, make sure you mix it to the manufacturer's directions. One of the things I did notice was I should have left a little bit more mesh on the outside so as I could grab hold of it a little bit easier. This should be fine, but that's just something for you to take notice of. When you're doing something of this nature where the center is cut out and it's round, you probably should actually leave a little bit more of the mesh on. But this will still work out fine. Okay, I'm just going to pop that on there now and spread it. Making sure I cover all the area. And I actually have a spreader here that I can use as well, but this knife seems to be doing okay for the time being. And I'm doing it in the cool. It's not a warm day or anything like that while I'm inside as well, but I did actually mix the thin set outside. I certainly don't want to be doing this on a hot day or a warm day. And if some of it goes on the stepping stone, I'm not worried about it because it's quite easily removed, the thin set. But I do want to cover all the area, all the back of that tessera. When I first used thin set, I was really quite frightened of it because it was so sticky, but really, you don't have to be scared of it. It's really a very good product. It's great, actually. Now, I don't want it really thick, so I'm now going to start spreading it out a little bit more. But as I say, making sure that back of the tessera is completely covered. Now, I'll use this because this will make it easier again. Now we're going to pick it up very carefully. And that's going to set it in place. I am sliding a little bit, but that's okay. Just going to wipe my hands. It's looking pretty good. Just going to wipe out some of that. Now before I push it down, I want to make sure it's in its right position, which it appears to be. Just getting rid of some of that excess that's around the edge there before I push it down. Okay, now I'm going to get my float. I'm just going to push it down. That's better. Making sure there's no pieces sticking up, which there isn't. And I'm not pushing it hard down to the concrete stepping stone. I'm just pushing it so it's in a bed of thin set. Now what I'm going to do now is clean up. Well, the epoxy sculpt is all mixed up, and now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just put it down as a slab like that. I'm not being too fussy about it because I'm going to shape it to how I want. I like, when I'm using epoxy sculpt, I like to use these type of gloves, and the reason being is that they're definitely stronger, but you can work in them without an issue, and I feel that's just really important. I think that's about it. Now what I'm going to do is now clean off the tessera, because I don't know whether you can see that, but there's all epoxy sculpt residue on that. So I'm going to clean that off now. Now I had thought of actually putting this in the center, like that. Well, not down that far. And I was thinking about maybe using some epoxy sculpt. This is porcelain, but I was thinking about doing that as well. So I think I might just do that. So I'm just going to get this bit of epoxy sculpt, the wastage that I used before, just give it another bit of a mix. Then we're going to push that down. Now this is a piece of crockery, and depending on where you are, really crockery is not designed to be used outside. However, I'm in a very mould area, so it should not be an issue. But just remember, it was never designed to be used for mosaics or outside. But it is porcelain, so it's not going to absorb moisture. Straighten that up. Shiny as. Now I'm up to doing the star, and I've mixed up some epoxy sculpt, and I'm going to now push it into an area. And I've only mixed up a small batch because I like to keep it fresh, because it only lasts for a certain period of time to, of course, for maximum adhesiveness. Because I want the bottom to be totally covered. That's better. So I'm going to now continue on with the rest of them. And then when I've done those, we will come back. Well, this has come up really well. It's all nice and clean, and I really love these glass tiles that I've used in the center. The reflections on them are really beautiful. Well, that's looking really quite good. Now I'm up to the background. I prefer to have too much than not enough thin set because I want that bottom to be totally covered. Making sure it's all the right height, which it is now, or it will be in a tick. All right, well, I'm going to continue on and then we'll come back part way through to have a look at what I've done. Well, it's a little bit messy, but that's not really an issue because all I have to do is just get a wet ones and wipe over it. And even where some of this tessera is a bit new, I just do that and it'll come up really quite well. I don't want to do it straight away because the thin set is still curing and I need it to firm really right up before I start wiping over the tessera because otherwise the tessera will wobble and I don't want that to affect the bond with the thin set. Well, it's almost completed. All I need to do now is grout. And I'm really happy with the overall design and the colors. And I love my little whimsical star in the center. I think it's looking really quite good. Now I've got my gloves on ready to grout and I'm going to be grouting in a epoxy grout. And the color I'm going to be grouting in is gray. I've got my mixed epoxy grout here. I'm going to apply it. Now you can use a rubber kidney for this, but I really like to use these wooden sticks. Sometimes I do use a rubber kidney though. It just depends on the project I'm doing. And the working time for this product is extremely good. We just need to push it into all those grout lines, pushing out any air that could be in them, and work it right into those grout lines. I'd have to say I mixed up about the right amount of grout, I think, which is about 400 grams for this. Water is the magic trick. And you don't have to press hard either. I'm just pressing sort of firmly. But if I've missed any gaps, if I've missed any grout lines, I now cannot go in and patch it up. It's not like sanded grout. I'll have to wait till it all dries and then go back and go in and patch it up. It's so easy to work with this product. I just love it. Like I said, I've tried I've been using other epoxy grouts for years and I just find this one's the easiest and the best one. I'm glad I did choose the grey and not the black. I think the black would have been a bit too pronounced on the lighter colours. Don't forget to clean the edge of your stepping stone as well and smooth that grout out as you go. Okay, we're going to leave this for around about 15 minutes. And then we'll come back and do a final clean. Back soon. We just go in with a sponge, a felt, and we just wipe over very well, firmly, but not over the top, pushing down on it. That's just to remove any of the residue, the epoxy residue. Okay, now we go in and I'll rinse it now with the clean water. You can use a sponge if you like. I'm just using this rag because it's what I have, and I'm actually out of sponges. Now we're going with a dry rag, clean dry rag before it dries. Look at that, magic. That's quite heavy actually. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Underneath this video is a description box. If you click on the two words that says show more, click on those and they will take you to some product links that I think you might be interested in, and also some other videos that I've created, and those links will take you to those videos. Now, if you've made some stepping stones, let me know what your preference of materials are to make your stepping stones. I'll be interested in having a read, and I know others will too. And I'll see you in the next video. Enjoy.